Hey there, welcome to Hobie on YouTube, and thanks for taking a look at this. I thought I would kind of update you on my ongoing project to modify a Victorinox one-handed opening 111 millimeter knife. I dubbed this knife my Victorinox Super Soldier because it's what I would like to see the Victorinox Soldier's knife here to be. And so I've tried to incorporate the features that I'd like to see in kind of a dream soldier knife. I think I'll also entitle this video something like the best Swiss Army knife money can't buy, because you can't just go out and buy this, obviously. If you want something like this, you're going to have to modify it or get somebody to do that for you. But anyway, it's been a fun project. I think I'm kind of at the end of it, but if you have any more ideas for me after watching this, please share them, so I can kind of take the evolution of this forward. And of course, you know, if you like any of these ideas, feel free to borrow them. Disclaimer, I didn't really start with a Victorinox soldier's knife. I started with the civilian equivalent of it, which is a Trekker or Trailmaster. It's the same knife, but it just has different scales that do accommodate tweezers and a toothpick. But once upon a time, you could get those with a plain edge blade, and that's what I wanted. So I found an older one with a plain edge blade, and that's what I started with. And I'll show you all that in a minute. But the first thing that I did was I removed the hollow plastic scales that come on a Trekker or Trailmaster. And these are the scales for a soldier's knife, by the way. They're a little better. They're nylon and they have these rubber grip points, but at the end of the day, they are just hollow plastic. So I wanted something more substantial than that. So I replaced them with an 1/8 inch thick piece of canvas micarta, green canvas micarta, which is just super strong and just almost indestructible. And I just very carefully made and fitted those scales to this knife. And that would be probably the most involved and biggest upgrade to this knife, but I really just love them. They give the knife a whole different feel. Feels very substantial and solid now. I have to think that it adds strength to the knife. You know, these very strong micarta scales epoxied to these aluminum liners. The knife no longer is squishy. You can't squish it. I think it has to add a lot of structural rigidity. But because it is strong and solid, now I could add a pocket clip. And in my opinion, these larger Victorinox knives are just screaming for a pocket clip. Now, not everybody is going to like this. Like any pocket clip, you know, it changes the looks. It certainly hurts the ergonomics. But I like the trade-off. I don't think it's too bad in the hand. And I can tell you, because this one has a pocket clip, it's getting a whole lot more pocket time. It just works really well. So that's a deep carry bead blasted pocket clip. It is screwed and glued to that micarta scale. I've never had any problems with it all loosening. It works really fine. Now that I have a pocket clip, I no longer needed the key ring. So all 111 millimeter Victorinox knives have this key ring. And what they've done here is they've brought a liner out to a squared off point there, drilled a hole in it, and put a key ring. I ground that off, and you can't even tell where it was, really. And that's one little hot spot at the butt of the knife that's no longer there to bother me, and maybe that kind of makes up in part for the pocket clip. To the blade, again, I picked a Trekker Trailmaster because I prefer the straight edge blade for a couple of reasons. Most one-hand opening 111 millimeter Victorinox knives, including the Soldier, come with this partially serrated blade. I really am not a big fan of this blade. To me, it's like a big steak knife. You can see it's serrated on the forward 2/3 of the blade, leaving just a very short straight cutting edge. The worst part to me is that it is a chisel grind. It's only sharpened from one side, and I find that harder to sharpen than, you know, bevel grind. And, you know, serrated blades are harder to sharpen. So I wanted to go with the regular plain edge blade that is equally beveled from both sides. It's easy to sharpen, takes a good edge. and it's just better suited for my purposes. I know what they're trying to do here. This is more of a survival, more of an emergency or rescue type of blade, and for cutting clothing and straps and things like that. And that's why they've kind of given it this dull tip, which was another feature I didn't really like a lot. So I did try to put a little sharper tip on mine. It's got a little better piercing ability now. The other thing I did to the blade is that I put jimping on the spine here, across the back of the one-hand opening hole or Spyderco hole. And that really works well. It locates your thumb, keeps it from just sliding up over there. I don't know why they don't do that to all these knives. It's a perfect place for it. So those are the modifications I did to the blade, the jimping and the sharper point. Oh, one other thing that I did while we have it open is I brought down the liner lock release. Once upon a time, trekkers and trail masters had a very low liner lock release like this, but when they used that knife as the basis for the soldier's knife back in 2008, they increased the size of it, as you can see here. Again, I think the idea was, good in the field, cold wet hands, gloved hands, whatever, you could still operate it. The trade-off is that it's very uncomfortable. So that's a sharp edge that cuts into your index finger when you grip the knife. It really does negate a lot of the nice ergonomics of this handle. So I did bring that down as much as I could to where it says press there. It's still easy to operate, but it does not cut into your finger nearly as much. Now I really can't feel it at all. So one of the other mods through the years I've made on this is I did give the cap lifter on the screwdriver a sharpened inside edge here. Now, once upon a time, that's the way soldiers' knives came. They started putting cap lifters on them in 1951, and I think up until about 1993, they always had a sharpened edge like that. It's just really good for several things: stripping cable, striking ferrod safely, shaving tinder. It's just another useful edge on your knife, and I don't know why they stopped doing that. But the modern ones, as you can see here, are just squared off. And since these tools are stone-washed, tumbled with ceramic pellets, there's no real sharp edge here at all to do any of those things I spoke of. So I did that, and surprisingly, that was the modification on the knife that took the most grinding and polishing. You actually have to remove quite a bit of material here to come up to this edge and get yourself a nice sharp edge. And then finally, one other new mod. I guess the new mod since I last talked about this knife would be grinding off the key ring. But one other new mod, it always bothered me how these larger Victorinox knives that had a reamer, sharpened reamer, didn't have a sewing eye like every other Victorinox. So usually they put a sewing eye in the reamer, and for some reason on the soldier's knife and the Trekker and Pioneer, some of these other the Trekker and the Trailmaster, some of these other knives, they don't put a sewing eye. So I went ahead and did that. And nothing fancy, just drilled a hole through it. I won't be doing a lot of sewing with this knife, but it's just nice to have it. So I did most of these modifications by hand with just a Dremel, and I'd say the hardest is the scales. You might need a bandsaw with a hardened blade or something, but most of the stuff can be done with hand tools. For instance, a sanding drum to work the edges of your scales. Here's a cutting wheel. That's what I use to put the jimping in the back of the blade. What do we have here? Here's a carbide drill bit. I believe that's about 3/32. That was for the sewing eye. Grinding stones of different sizes to, make your sharpened cap lifter, grind down your liner lock release a little bit if you care to do that. And finally, I've got a hard felt wheel here that you can dip in polishing compound to kind of clean everything up when you're through grinding on it or sharpening it or whatever. So yeah, that's kind of it, I think, for this knife. I'm pretty much out of ideas. I'm down to silly little things like putting a high-vis spot on the saw to make it easier to find quickly. But hey, like I said, if you like any of these ideas, feel free to borrow them, of course. And if you have any more ideas for me, things that, can be done practically to make this knife more functional, hey, leave those in the comment sections, please. And I appreciate you guys. As always, have fun collecting. And if you're modifying any knives, good luck to you.